This lesson is the second in the face drawing series, and this will focus on drawing eyes and shading eyes. So before you draw the shape, first you always have to do your math. So we need to figure out what the proportions are of eyes. One of the biggest mistakes that people make, not only do they always put eyes too high on the head, they always draw them too large. So I pulled up a picture of Justin Trudeau here as an example to take a look at the proportions. So what I'm going to do is just take a scrap piece of paper and figure out the width to the height ratio. So the outside of the eye, the white of the eye is right there, the inside, and I'm going right to the inner corner where the pink skin is right about there. Okay, so we know the width. So now what I'm going to do is turn the page and put it at the top of, again, the white part of the eye is right about there. And where is the bottom? And this will give us the proportion of the height to the width. And of course it changes, not just by person who has large eyes, who has smaller eyes, and the shape of their eyes, but what they're doing. Is somebody giving you the evil glare and their eyes are going to be thinner, or are they looking wide-eyed and it's going to change the math? So in this case, what I always like to do is just look at, here's the width, there's the height. So I always just like to find halfway, and if I can find halfway, it'll help me figure out my math. So half is right about here. So I know that if I go just like a little bit less than half, it's almost to a third. That's going to give us the start that we need. So I'm going to then transfer that math onto this image. So I'm just going to do exactly the same idea. I'm going to go like this. I'm going to, let's just zoom in here. So I know what the width is. It's this much. I divide it in half, and then it was right about here. That is the math that we need. So I'm just taking the information off the original photo and transferring it to my image. So, and just so I don't get confused, I'm going to do that. So now I need to center that measurement this way. All right. So once again, I took the width, compared it to the height, took that information and transferred onto this piece of paper, and I'm going to use this piece of paper, use the right edge to make sure my blocking lines are perfect. Not everybody has their left and their right eye the same size. In fact, many people don't. That's another thing to keep conscious of. Okay, so make sure that you have a rectangle, not a square, right? If you have a square, that means that you forgot to divide it up. It has to be this shape. Okay, so once we have that shape, we can go ahead and start drawing. Remember, math before shape. So we'll just use Justin here as a bit of an example. Now, his head is slightly tilted up, but the basics of the shape of an eye always remain the same. So starting in the corner, they go up, over across the top, before curving down into this corner. And I'm just going to lower this a little bit. And then usually a bit flatter across the bottom. So the shape of your eyes change as you age as well. So you'll find with younger people that it all goes up like this and up like this to the middle. And as people start to age, especially this part of the eye here starts to sag. This is the most common area where it sags. and we start to draw a bit flatter on the bottom and more rounded on the top. Right. So one of the hardest parts is actually trying to get this eye to be the same as that eye. So reminder that whenever you're trying to see if anything is the same, I'm just going to lightly sketch it in. One of the things to do is to turn your page upside down. So the minute you go like that, it's a lot, whoa, this is way smaller than this one. It's so much easier to see it. Always check your work by turning your page upside down. Okay, so let's just focus on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and erase my blocking lines. Reminder to keep them really nice and light, because you can damage the surface of the paper every time you erase. You always want to make sure you're using really nice quality white erasers. The Staedtler Mars eraser is always a good one. You want to avoid this. If possible, the pink erasers tend to rough up the surface of a paper, and that can really affect it when you go to do shading. And as always, keep your fingertips off the paper as much as you can to keep the oil off the page. All right, so it looks like my blocking lines are still there, just because I'm zooming in so much on the eye. And again, I never want outlines, so I never want dark lines. So if you need to go back, that's another one of the tricks for getting your drawings to look more realistic, is never, ever, ever having lines around anything. Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to stop and just discuss the anatomy of an eye for a minute. So when you think about it, there is the white part of the eye is actually a sphere. And if I do the side view of this, you have a piece of skin here, right, to give you, there's your eyelashes, to give you an idea. And you have another piece of skin down here, and you have your little lower eyelashes right here before you go into your cheek. There's your nose. And then you have the piece of skin that comes up like this. Here's your eyebrows are up here. Sorry, eyebrows are way up here. All right, anyways, it's this part is what we're looking at. So that shape we just created is actually, we were drawing the skin going around the eye. Okay, and in that sphere, of course, we have the iris, the part with the color on it, and we have the pupil. All right. So the first thing we have to do is figure out where do they go within that shape. And a mistake that is often made is this, right? Is you never see that full circle unless someone's got their eyes. They actually have to take their fingers and hold their eyes open in order to see that. When you look at eyes, you usually don't see any white above or below unless the person's looking up or looking down. So once again, I'll take out this picture, and if we look here, you can see that the colored part of his eye extends. So if I was to draw it, it would go down here, over here, and up over the top a little bit. So we need to do that same thing on our drawing. So I'm going to put it in the middle, assuming someone's looking straight at you. And I'm going to do a circle. Again, it must be a circle. It can't be an oval. And mine's not circly enough. So let's try it again. And one of the ways to check to see if this is a circle is the height the same as the width? Yep, there we go. Now I know it's closer to a circle than the original one I had. And then once you do that, you can go ahead and erase the part that goes over the top and under the skin. So you are left with something like this. Okay, so at this point, I can go ahead and, so what we just drew is we just drew the iris, right? The colored part right here. Right. And now we need to draw the pupil, which is the black part in the middle. Now, the pupil size changes. You probably realize that when you're exposed to a lot of light, your pupil goes really small. And in a dark light situation, your pupil enlarges a lot. Almost all images that you see tend to be photoshopped because, you know, the lighting, when photographers take their picture, often causes the pupil to decrease. So often they'll go back and Photoshop them larger if you're seeing like a photo shoot of Beyonce or something. All right, so what we need to do is just make sure that we're always in the middle, that we're centered. And drawing the iris is kind of the fun part. So I want to make sure that your pupil's not too large. And again, I'm just kind of looking at a photo. And I've made mine an oval. I've made that mistake again. So one of the ways to check is to do this. From this edge to this edge is that much. And I go over here and you can see, yep, it's too wide over here. I'm not a circle. I'm an oval. So I need to make sure I've got a circle within a circle. And you notice that I'm constantly going back and using the math to figure this out. I always have a scrap piece of paper. I'm always checking. Am I centered? I've learned the hard way that if you rush through these parts, because I personally can't wait to start shading, and I always rush the math, and it ends up messing me up in the end. So the more I draw, the more I've learned. Just take the time, check these details now. So first we do math, second we do shape, third we start shading for form. Okay, so the pupil is the darkest thing on your face. It's always black and it's always a circle. However, it also has a texture, so you know it's smooth. So you can't go and start going like this, blah, because it looks like you have a furry pupil. Right? So we have to make sure it's nice and smooth. And the other part of the texture is to remember is that it's wet, which means it's shiny, so it also has to have a highlight. So one of the things you want to avoid is you don't want to do this. You don't want to cut this white space out. This is an anime cartoon style is where they do that perfect quarter of a pie thing. You want to take a shape and just kind of take some kind of shape out. I usually do it in the top left-hand corner, just picking where the highlight would be. And you just want to make sure that you use the same shape and size and placement in both eyes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just take out that little shape here. And now I can start shading. And we want this solid and we want it black. I like to draw eyes with a mechanical pencil. You'll see why for the next step. But of course you will also need a regular drawing pencil as well when we get to the rest of the shading. The other thing to remember is as we start to shade, it looks really kind of funny on the page, but as we continue to develop this face drawing, you're not even going to notice this stuff. Okay, so the next part of drawing the eye is the iris, the colored part. And everybody has a really unique pattern for their iris, and this is just kind of a technique that I came up with that best represents it. So what we're going to do is do a series of small lines. So that's why I really like to use a mechanical pencil for this one. I just can't get as small as a line with a regular pencil. You can just make sure that you're sharpening that pencil a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this. I'm going to start to go here, 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 and here. And then I like to fill the spaces in like this. And then I'll start to go and fill in the rest of the eye. All right, so let me do that on my good copy. I just don't want to mess up the angles, so I find it easier. Now, I also like to let this white highlight continue into the iris. Okay, if you stop like that, it looks horrible. So what you actually want to do is you actually want to do this. Now that you've got those first lines in so you know the right direction, you're going to go back in and start to fill this area with small little lines close together. This is going to give you the pattern. And of course, you should be turning your page to help you do this, so that you end up with something that looks like that. And close up, it doesn't look so good, but when you see it from farther back, it starts to look like the texture of an eye. But that was only the first step. So the other thing that you'll notice if you look at anyone's eyes is they also have a dark circle going around the outside. It's hard to see this on dark colored eyes, but the lighter the eyes are, the easier it is to see it. So we want to take this edge. We don't want to go past the skin. We want to go like this and take a dark, thicker line. And we want to do the same on this side and thicken it up a little bit. And I just did what I said not to do earlier. I've just taken and created a dark outline around something, which makes it flat and makes it cartoony. And of course, our goal here is to go for high realism. So what I need to do is soften this line, and this also creates this really cool effect. You need to start going around the exterior, and you're going to do the same kind of lines going towards the middle, but not that long. So I'm just going to start with a bunch of little short ones, and every once in a while I'll throw in a little bit of a longer line. And this does a couple of things. It stops that line from looking like an outline, and it also starts to make this more three-dimensional. So you can see why using a really sharp point really will help you out. When you get to the bottom, of course, we don't have that dark circle because it's down here. So you would only just kind of see a little bit like that. Same with on the top. You're not going to see it out, all of that, because it's being covered by that skin. And this starts to create the 3D of the eye. Another one that is kind of cool is just to pick like maybe 4 or 5 lines and go out from the middle. So I'm going to go one here, one there. There's already kind of one there, there, and that. Just to create a little bit more interest in the eye. So at this point, I'm going to actually shade this part of the eye before I continue on. And going back to my fake glow drawing here again. So this is the shape created by the lids, but of course there's pink all in this part of the eye. And once again, sorry about the quality of this picture, but the pink of the eye starts right about here. So we need to cut this kind of part out like that. So by doing that, what we're going to do is, now I personally don't like to shade this part. I like to just use a smudgy. If you don't have a smudgy at your house, remember it's just a piece of paper that's been rolled up into a cone shape. So it's the sort of thing you can make your own. You can also use Q-tips. They're a little soft, but you can use those to shade. And a Kleenex, taking a Kleenex and rolling it up and taping it so it's into a point will also help you out. So I'm going to do that thing where I'm just going to shade on a scrap little piece of paper to get my smudgy a little dirty because it's a brand new one. And now I can go ahead and I just want to softly shade this area, and it looks horrible when you do it. But once again, once you do the rest of the shading on the face, you're not even going to notice that. And once again, I don't have a circle. I need that white to be a circle. So I'm going to go like that. The other thing is, of course, this is a sphere. And you know how to shade spheres. They must go darker on the edges, lighter in the middle, darker on the other side in order to appear rounded. So we're going to do that out here in the corner. Again, I'm going to use my smudgy. And I'm just going to start, notice how I'm moving with the sphere. So I'm going to start just adding a little bit of shading in my corner. Again, I don't use a pencil to do this. I like to just use a smudgy. Again, if you have control of your pencil, then absolutely the ultimate way to draw is to never actually have to smudge, that you can control your pencil so well that you're able to really lightly shade. Having different pencils would also help. Having some H level pencils to get that lighter shading would also make something as delicate as this a little easier. The other shadow that I'm going to put on right now is, once you put the eyelashes on, they will create a shadow. So if we think about this drawing here, once you have those eyelashes, there would be a shadow underneath here. So we're just going to go ahead and put that on. And it's going to go, so you're just going to take the whole top of it and create a shadow. Like that. Okay, so before we go ahead and do those eyelashes, we need to do the lid. So eyelids are change from person to person, because when you think about it, your eyelid is this piece of skin here. So in this case, I have it going around the sphere and stopping right here. Well, that would be the top of the eyelid that we see here. But other people, this skin is higher up, and they go back like this before it goes up, which means that line is a lot closer here. And again, a lot of this is based on your ethnic origin, and it can also just go up like this. The flap of skin does not bend around the top of the sphere, and there is no crease at all. So you tend to just take a look at, when you're drawing off of an actual picture, it's easier because you would just look at what happens. So in this case, the lid is right here. And then I said, as you age, this part of your eye, the skin droops a lot. So people don't actually have a crease anymore usually after a certain age. Unless, of course, they got surgery to fix that. Right. Oops. So In this case, we're just going to take basically this top line here, and let's just go a little above it. And do something like that. And once again, that's a line. Don't really like lines because as we just looked at it, it's actually just a crease in the skin. So if you take your smudgy and soften that, and I'm going to lighten mine even a little bit more. I don't want it that noticeable thing. And I'm just going to soften that line a little bit. It's a lot better. And then we can put on the eyelashes. So, biggest mistakes that are made when drawing faces are, first of all, the eyes being way too high on the face, the eyes being way too large, and then eyelashes. Wow, they can make things go bad real fast. So if we think about the shape of an eye, right? What you don't want to do is the typical this, right? That looks like there's a spider living underneath the eyelid and it's trying to make its way out. That's not what eyelashes look like. When you look at someone's face, what you see is you usually just see this. You just see a darkened area right here. And you have to be this close to someone before you can actually start seeing those lines. So, let's go back to the drawing. So, step number 1 is we're just going to take this upper area and start darkening it. And I usually don't darken past the inside of the iris. I usually just kind of leave that part alone. And start coming out to the outer side like this. And then that curling line for the eyelash, just start it out here. So take it out to the corner. And we're just going to start doing it this way. So a couple things you do not want to do. You don't want to go like this. Here is the curve. Here is the line. I'm going to do the same thing right beside each other over it. That looks so fake. What you want to do is I'm going to go like this. Unless they're professionally done or they're photoshopped, eyelashes just don't go like this. They tend to go in more like clumps like this. So I'm just going to go one this direction, one that direction. Now, as I start to come towards the middle, they're going to start to get shorter as they're coming towards us. And we're going to do something more like this. Then to get them thicker, as you want to start to thicken them, just thicken the bottom. Don't thicken at the top. So, back to my drawing. Don't make them all perfect. And you want to get so that when you get to the top, they're only about that long. And we're going to start with something like this. And then as it's right in front of you, they look shorter like this. And then we can just start curving a little bit, going this way. And I don't put too much attention to the inner eye. It's a lot easier to go back and play with the outside area. So now I'm going to go in that second part. I said if you want to start darkening the eyelashes, you just go ahead and do it at the base of the eyelashes. So the more you want someone to look like they have makeup on or just have really thick eyelashes, dark eyelashes, that sort of thing is done here at the bottom. And mine were just a little too solid, so I just kind of went back in and spaced them out a bit. And you start to get a very realistic looking eye.